Chapter 41 of the best-selling novel, The Adventures of Matt Rufs, Mexican Jewel. Awarded Fiction Book of the Year and given top-star reviews by literary critics, this novel is also highly rated by the readers. Upon landing, Emily followed Antonio to the airport exit, unconsciously touching his elbow as they walked along the narrow passage surrounded by the other passengers leaving the plane. Emily had become so comfortable with this man who was a complete stranger to her only a few hours ago. This was not quite like her in the least, as she had always been a guarded person by nature, but then again, everything that she was doing now was out of her usual comfort zone. Emily had herself made this step out by boarding the plane, and now, her whole world seems to have changed. Antonio appreciated her accidental touch. He smiled blissfully, glancing in her direction. At the end of the passage, the passengers spilled into a larger waiting area of the gate, looking around for signs guiding them out of the airport. Upon finding those signs, then turning to the right and walking further between the rows of seats where the other passengers were waiting to board their respective planes, Emily and Antonio finally found their exit. Antonio walked fast, aiming to overtake the crowd and make it first to the customs. Emily hurried behind him, happy not to lose any time now that she had landed in Mexico. The customs booths were aligned in a row, with each having a border officer sitting behind the plexiglass with a computer and a small device that scans the fingerprints of each person entering the country. Arriving passengers were obligated to provide standard travel information to the authorities, place their hand to be scanned for fingerprints, and once their identity was verified against the INM, National Institute of Immigration, database, they were given the all-clear to enter the country. Antonio suggested that Emily go first and say that she was here to join her brother. Perhaps, it would be wise not to disclose too many details about his disappearance just yet. Such a disclosure would sound alarming and would certainly delay Emily's entry into the country, as customs officers would need to look into this information first. It was Emily's plan to find Matt on her own, not simply wait for the authorities to come up with leads. And she needed freedom to be able to do so. After all, the authorities had not succeeded in finding Matt up to this point. Antonio could not wait for too long. He had to get to the volcano site. He had a mission to find out some crucial information about the ancient sacrifices and gather the results from the underground lab. He knew that the Volcan de Colima was getting progressively unstable. There were signs of increased seismic activity, such as increased frequency and intensity of felt earthquakes, changes in heat flow, and noticeable fumarolic activity. Fumaroles are openings in the Earth's surface that emit steam and volcanic gases, such as sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide. They can occur as cracks or fissures near active volcanoes or in areas where magma has risen into the Earth's crust without erupting. Visually, this appears as smoke coming out of the Earth's surface. This information was continuously monitored by seismologists and volcanologists around the world, who would install monitoring equipment both in the volcano areas and on satellites, continuously recording the Earth's surface changes. Antonio was periodically updated by his base team back at the cartel, who were urging him to complete his mission without delay. Despite all the equipment and efforts, it was still difficult to accurately predict any volcanic eruptions, but since signs of increased activity were present, it was best to hurry. Antonio planned to get in and out of the area in less than 48 hours. Once Antonio and Emily passed the customs booths, Antonio grabbed Emily's hand and charged down the hallway, past the shops and wandering tourists, and directly to the taxi area to hail a quick cab that would take them to the helicopter. After a short wait in line, a smiling driver opened the door for them. Antonio and Emily slid into the back seat and started their adventure in the warm and aromatic country of Mexico. For a second, it felt like they were a loving young couple that came here for a week's vacation to get away from the hustle and bustle of a big city, ready to bathe in the sun and warm ocean. But they both knew they had a different life, a different mission, at least for this trip. The helicopter team was waiting patiently by the helipad, ready to take off at any time. Seeing the cab quickly approaching, the pilot waved to the assistants and jumped inside to start the engines. The noise made it impossible to talk or hear others, but everything was understood with a slight nod of the head or another small gesture to indicate one of the very few options for this situation. From here on, the operation was to be very efficient. Everyone was trained and knew exactly what they were supposed to do. Antonio was accustomed to directing these types of field teams. He took a quick look around and nodded his head in agreement before climbing on board. Once up, he then offered his hand to help Emily climb on board as well before taking off. The full book of The Adventures of Matt Rufs, Mexican Jewel, is available now on Amazon. Chapter 41 of the best-selling novel, The Adventures of Matt Rufs, Mexican Jewel. Awarded Fiction Book of the Year and given top-star reviews by literary critics, this novel is also highly rated by the readers.